If there's anything about the game that I think most Nikke players can agree it's bad, is commanderless advice sessions. Like, people don't like it already when the commander is not involved in a Nikke's Bond story, even if it makes sense. Like we've seen, for example, in the Evangelion collab, right? With their characters' Bond stories not involving the commander, at least not until the second part. But even then, they will be able to forgive that or to tolerate it if they can at least interact with the Nikke's during the advice sessions. Which is why, for example, nobody complains about the Goddess Squad advice sessions, because even if it's not the actual commander, you still get to, like, step into the shoes of the legendary commander and interact more directly with the Nikke's that way. And pretty much every single Goddess Squad Nikke has a Bond story that does not involve the commander at all, or at least not primarily, like most Bond stories do. But they at least have the advice sessions, which is why Nikke players more or less tolerate those. And upon hearing that, a lot of people are going to dismiss this criticism, arguing things like, oh, Nikke commanders are just a bunch of parasocial idiots who just want to self insert as the boyfriends of their like chosen waifu. That's why they don't like it. But not only is this just a poor attempt to dismiss genuine criticism, it's also just, well, blatantly wrong. As if there's another thing I think most Nikke commanders can agree on, is that most Nikke stories that don't involve the commander and that focus on the stories of specific Nikkes are actually some of the best stories in the whole game. Think, for example, Overzone, Red Ash, Last Kingdom, Old Tales, Mudfish. Heck, even this anniversary story, Unbreakable Bubble, that has been somewhat controversial with the fanbase, a lot of people still regard it as being good. Not as good as some of the previous anniversaries and half anniversaries, but legitimately still really good. They have their criticisms, but they still like it. So, focusing on the Nikkes themselves, on their stories aside from the commander, and having these moments when they can interact with each other and leave their own stories outside of their love interest, like, is not only a part of the game that's loved, but one of the most loved parts of the game. So why are commanderless Bond stories and especially advice sections like so hated? And that's because of the importance of Nikke interaction. Sure, having Nikke stories that don't involve the commander, like giving them a personality and a story outside of those interactions, is good. It's actually one of the most praised things about this game. However, getting to interact with the waifus, getting to actually romance and get closer to the Nikkes is, yes, an important part of the game. And so, while people don't need that to like be the focus or be done all the time, they do consider having at least the opportunity to do that, even if it's not romantic, even if those interactions are more friendly in nature, is, yes, important to a lot of players. Which is why when you have a character that does not have this at all, like, for example, again, the collab characters from the first Evangelion collab, as well as now with Siren and Mihara and all these other characters, right? Like, when you don't give this opportunity at any point, neither during the event or during the advice sessions or during the bond stories or at any point, you take away a big part of the appeal of this game and of these characters. Again, the point isn't that, oh no, Nikkei players hate when their waifus have stories that don't involve them. No, that's not the point. But even if they do have stories that don't involve the commander should have the opportunity to interact with them in at least some minor way. That is the point. That is the criticism. Like, why would you make such an amazing, wifeable character with such a cool design and like endearing personality and not let us interact with her in any way, shape, or form? That's what a lot of Nikkei players find so disappointing. And a lot of people are going to say, oh no, but it makes sense. They were just trying to experiment with something new. They were just trying to do something different. Like, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong is that when you perform an experiment and it fails, you don't perform that same experiment again. Like, you can try a different experiment, even if it's very similar to that one. You can try a different version of that experiment, but you don't try the same thing if you know that it failed. And heck, Nikkei acknowledges this, which is why, again, in the second part of the Evangelion event, this issue was fixed. And so they should have known that this was a problem and not done it again, but they did. They made like both the bond stories and the advice sessions of, to a lesser extent, Mihara bonding chain and especially Siren or the Little Mermaid not involve the commander at all. And you might say, oh, but these make sense. These characters haven't met the commander yet. They haven't had the chance. Like, how could we have these characters like interact with the commander in the advice sessions or the bond stories if they haven't encountered the commander yet? And the answer is very simple. In fact, it has already been done. Because you don't need to, like most bond stories and most advice sessions with the Nikkeis canonically occur before their events, right? Which explains how on most events which involve the commander, the Nikkeis are already aware of him and already have kind of an established relationship with him even before they start interacting. But we already have a few cases, even recent ones, where both the bond stories and the advice sessions are set after the event. Heck, the recently released both Brady and Crust both follow this formula. Both their advice sessions and their bond stories occur well after their respective events. And so they could have easily like done that for Mihara and Siren as well. Like after their events, after they like go through their whole adventure like without the commander and develop their own stories and relationships with other people, other Nikkeis, like they could have these advice sessions like after those events, after they are done with this adventure and have a chance to meet the commander. And actually, the end of the event is the perfect opportunity, as both Mihara and Yuni pretty much already have a chance to come back to the arc, and they already like performed a very like important and notable feat in defeating even if only one of Gluttony's mouths. And so they already have something very impressive to show Siwen as a proof of their importance. And so that would be the perfect excuse for Mihara to not just reminisce about her previous interactions with the commander, but you have new ones to come back to the arc and to re-encounter him and to have like real interactions with both her current self and the current commander. Heck, imagine if this was a way to already introduce then to the commander and their situation and develop especially not only Mihara's but Yuni's character. Heck, Siren has an even better excuse. She, at the end of her event, like, encounters both Cinderella and Grave, which are very much in contact with the commander. If these advice sessions were set after the event, like, we could have had a perfect excuse to introduce Siren to the commander and to set more direct interactions with her through her advice sessions if you simply made this simple like change. And it wouldn't like ruin anything because sure, maybe they are saving their encounter for a very like epic and action filled reveal, right? The re-encounter of the commander and Mihara in Uni, or his first encounter with Siren. They want both of these to be super epic in the main story, right? But you don't need to. Like I said, most Bond stories are already set like before the proper events involving these characters. So having the advice sessions and the Bond stories of both these characters be set after Unbreakable Bubble, but before the like next story events, like, wouldn't ruin anything. Just like the any of the other Bond stories which are set before the actual events didn't ruin anything. Like the fact that the commander encountered those Nikkes before, like Flora, for example, canonically, in no way ruins the story of her event, for example. Same thing with Phantom or any of the various other Nikkes that the commander canonically encounters, either through the story or through the Bond story and advice session, like canonically before their actual events. Like it didn't ruin anything. So what is this fear of it like ruining this epic reveal that they want to make later? No, it wouldn't. And if anything, him meeting them in a more casual manner and then they showing up in a more epic manner during a fight would only like make those encounters even more special, like even more epic. So there really was no reason for this. It disappointed a lot of players, and it really was just completely unnecessary. There were so many ways they could have avoided doing that, and so many previous experiences which should have told them already that this was a bad idea from the start that is just inexcusable. There's no reason why they should have made the advice sessions the way they did, other than for just novelty for the sake of novelty, which is exactly one of the things I used to praise Nikke for not doing and criticize many other games for doing. So yeah, while personally I don't care so much about these commanderless advice and Bond stories as other players do, I can definitely understand the sentiment, and I do think the criticisms are justified, especially now. At this point, again, I think Shift Up should have known better, honestly. So yeah, just a very disappointing decision overall. But that's just mine and, well, a lot of other players' opinions. But I'm open to obviously different views. So what did you think? Did you think these like new types of advice interactions were neat? Do you think they should actually experiment more with those as well as with the Bond stories, or do you agree that this was a misstep? I look forward to seeing all your opinions in the comments below. And that will be it for today. If you like this video, please do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc. And I genuinely do hope to see you next time. If you really liked it, I'd also really appreciate if you could support me financially, either through a one-time paid comment donation or by joining my membership, where for $1 a month, you get to participate in exclusive polls in order to decide which videos I'll make next. Like, which of my plans should I focus on? Which of the content I have in mind do you want to see first? That kind of thing. As well as get your name put in this fancy little screen right here. Just as a small gesture of appreciation, exactly for your monthly support. But of course, no matter how much you choose to give me, as well as if you choose to give me anything at all, do know that I really appreciate any cent you're willing to throw my way, as well as just the fact that you're watching this video up to this point at all. But with all that stuff out of the way, I think it's finally time to, as always, bid you guys farewell. Obscure Anime out.